Chapter 21. Before dawn had even lit the eastern sky the next morning, Nikolai was out at the stables helping Oleg, the ox cart driver, hitch up old Maxim. Oleg would be working with Nikolai for the day to teach him the routine of hauling water from the spring. Nikolai knew that this was his chance to win Sabbath privileges and be a powerful witness for God. For 2 years now, he had been confined repeatedly in a wooden box for 10 days at a time because he wouldn't work on the Sabbath. But he had remained true to his convictions and suffered everything the warden could throw at him. Now God had provided Nikolai a way of escape through the torture box with his faith still intact. It was time for Nikolai to witness in a different sort of way. There was so much at stake. Would God help Nikolai to do what seemed to be impossible? Could Nikolai and Maxim haul 7 days worth of water in just 6 days of work each week? In this week, the task was even more daunting. 5 days worth of water in four. In Nikolai's mind, it would take a miracle, but that was, of course, what God was all about. It was what Nikolai's busy life as a pastor had been all about. It was what his interrogation episodes with the KGB had been about. His eventual sentence at this prison camp and his confinement in the box for refusing to work on the Sabbath day. And it was what his release and new assignment with Maxim were all about. Nikolai's life of sacrifice and service to God had been one miracle after another, and Nikolai doubted that the miracles would stop now. There was too much at stake. And so it was that Nikolai and Oleg set out for the spring across the treeless steeps. It took them more than an hour to make the trek as they walked along laboriously behind the plodding ox. "Can we make this old ox hurry any faster?" Nikolai complained as the ox cart lumbered slowly along past the muskegs and around bogs. "If he walks this slow all day, we'll never get our 5 loads in by the end of today. Oh, we'll get the water in, all right. But old Maxim has never promised me that we do it before dark. Often we come trudging in long after dark. You should know that. You were there in the shed to witness it lots of times." Nikolai stared at Oleg, a stunned look settling in on his face. If they couldn't manage the regular number of loads in a given day, how were they going to be able to get the extra barrels of water hauled to the camp? Oleg just shook his head. "I guess you thought this was going to be an easy job," he snorted. No, not actually. But I was hoping we'd be able to get Maxim to move along a little faster." Oleg made a face and shook his head again. "Look, I'm sorry that you had to stay cooped up in that box, and I'm glad the colonel let you out. But this business of getting more barrels of water so you can have your day off is crazy. Old Maxim here knows nothing about any of that. All he knows is that when he wants to walk, he walks. And when he wants to walk slower, there's nothing you can do to hurry him up." Nikolai wanted to say something, but he didn't. "I know what you're thinking," Oleg kept on. "You were thinking that since you're a preacher man, your God would work some kind of miracle. I'm right, aren't I?" Oleg gave the ox a slap on his rump. "You thought your God would reach down out of the sky above and tickle old Maxim's ear or something to make him move faster, didn't you? And then Maxim would run like nobody's business and have all the water for the week hauled to the camp in 6 days. Hey, maybe even in 5." Oleg was still shaking his head. His reaction seemed logical enough. Should Nikolai have expected anything less? He had thought the other prisoners might admire him for standing up for what he believed in. But maybe that wasn't the case at all. Maybe they had no respect for the man who wouldn't work, especially if he was asking for one day of work off at 7. All the men were working hard, and they were all being held at the prison camp against their will. Then, too, like the warden, they didn't know a thing about Nikolai's God or the devotion he had for his maker. Nikolai had nothing more to say, so he walked the remainder of the distance in silence. What was the use? The first rays of sunshine were just beginning to peek over the horizon when they arrived at the spring. Nikolai helped Oleg dip wooden buckets into the pool of water at the spring and then pour them into the barrels waiting on the ox carts. It wasn't a hard task, but several times Nikolai sloshed water from the buckets on himself. The morning air was still chilly, and the cold water made Nikolai shiver. He realized that if he wanted to stay dry, he was going to have to learn how to put more water into the barrels and less on himself. Besides, if he were careless, it would take that much longer to fill the barrels. Oleg put the wooden lids on the two barrels and then nudged Maxim forward with his ox goad. Nikolai was glad to see that Oleg no longer used the leather prod to beat Maxim. He used the goad instead to guide the ox and set signals as to what he wanted him to do. The trip back to camp took even longer since the cart was loaded down with full barrels of water. Several times Nikolai tried to urge Maxim along faster, but always the old ox resisted his efforts. In fact, any attempts to hurry him along seemed to make him move slower. If Nikolai could have gotten into the harness to help Maxim pull the cart along faster, he thought he would gladly do it. As it was, he and Oleg were at the mercy of Maxim and his whims to move along at his own pace. In the end, Nikolai realized Oleg was right. There was nothing they could do but walk along patiently beside the cart.